Okay. Hello, everyone. Let's call our meeting to order.
7:03.
7:03. How's everyone there? Maddie, Alexandra, Stacy?
Lights on.
Good. Okay, good. All right. Welcome and introductions. So we have a discussion question. I'm just going to change the wording just a little bit. So a lot's happened since our last meeting in the world, in this country. So what have you been thinking about since this last meeting? Keeping in mind that we're a public meeting, right? And that we respect everyone's opinions. Okay.
I've been in the climate space. I've been thinking about the climate hub. We put up a sort of a draft up on the wall in the Commons, and with the only graffiti we've had so far is 1 million baby salmon that somebody has driven all over that. So we'll sort of see if there's some way we can talk about climate in a casual way to get things.
Somebody wrote Elon Musk is our climate hero.
Oh.
It was hard before. Working in the climate space is going to be harder. And deregulation of things that protect our health are things that we just need to be aware of. Watching.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been a tough week. Anxiety is through the roof, and what do you call them, dreams? My nightmares are a little different this past week, so I know it's affecting me. Different faces in my nightmares. I often work through the night in my sleep.
Oh.
And most of the time find that in the morning I solved the problem, but the problem didn't really exist. But I worked through it. So whether it's spreadsheets, forms, processing, work related, but I would say it feels tougher now. A bigger lift locally, luckily consensus, and that's where we operate, and so that's what I've been thinking about.
So I've been thinking about the use of the word believe in the climate science space. Because I come at this as a scientist and I don't have to believe in science. It's actually not relevant. I mean, gravity doesn't care whether or not I believe in gravity. Climate doesn't care whether we believe in climate science. Science doesn't care whether we believe in science. Facts simply are. And I think one of the challenges we're going to be grappling with as we work forward with our community at large is to differentiate between systems of belief and systems of knowledge, between fact-based systems and philosophy. And I think it's going to be imperative that we stay rooted in a fact-based system. And I would like us all to be very conscious. I urge us to not use the question, do you believe in climate change? More of what have you observed in your life? What have you learned from real data? It's not a question of belief. So that's been my pondering of the week.
I've spent a lot of time thinking about spheres of influence and control, and there's a lot that we can't influence and control right now, and feeling heartened by participating in things like this, the tree board, other local things, the work, etc. Where there is still work to do, and there is it will take time, but there is more direct paths to seeing potential for concrete change.
Alexandra, Stacy, would you like to share?
Go ahead, Stacy.
Nothing like being put on the spot in the first meeting. No, this week have reflected on an article that came out in the New York Times about how if you think things are really great or really bad, you really have no clue, because history has shown that who knows what the pivot point is that sort of pushes us towards the future that's ahead of us. It could be better than what would have happened if things had gone, the way you wanted them to, or it could be worse, right? So it's like nice having that kind of revised perspective. And other than that, I'm just sort of ready for the roller coaster.
Sarah, do you want to go next?
I went first.
She's in the room here with us.
Oh, great. Sorry, I see you in the room and on the screen. Okay, thank you.
Did you want me to read on the screen?
Perfect. Great. Sorry about that, Sarah. Yeah, I'll go next. I think I am feeling very grateful that we live in Washington. Yeah, I'm trying to, similar to you, Victoria, I'm feeling like reflecting on spheres of influence and what I can control in my personal life and in my professional life, and where I can try to create moments of Zen for others. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But Maddie, and you can introduce yourself if you want, since you're new.
Hi, I'm Maddie. She, her, and I work for Cascadia as a senior associate. And I've been at Cascadia about 6 years, working on all kinds of climate and natural resources management, planning, facilitation, engagement projects. Worked with perhaps some of you earlier this year, doing a very brief review of the near final climate action plan, which is very exciting. So it's great to be plugging back in to this community a little bit. And on this project in particular, I'll be leading the policy audit, policy development, and working alongside Alexandra to coordinate and make sure all of the tasks are speaking to each other along the way. Things I'm thinking about since the last CPAT meeting, so I've been here behind the scenes. I think a takeaway for me is to be careful about making assumptions about where people are coming from, and just going into every conversation with an open mind and being prepared to acknowledge people's experiences. And the other thing I'm thinking about is just the continued importance and power of local work as we talk about spheres of influence. There are a lot of things that are really powerful at the local level, a lot about community building, transportation, buildings, natural spaces that can really only be done at the local level. And that work continues, whether it's easy at the federal level or harder at the federal level. There's a lot we can do.
Welcome, Maddie.
Thank you.
And just to share quickly, what I've been thinking a lot about is just implementation. Thinking of, yeah, it will be much more difficult. All change is difficult because people have a hard time with change. And that's part of our job, is to help facilitate that process, leading the city to, making steps to make our community more resilient. Okay, so with that, thank you everyone for sharing, because I got a lot out of just listening to where everyone's at. It's heartening and disheartening at the same time. So the agenda. Anyone have any questions about the agenda? Or is there a motion to accept the agenda as it stands?
Move to accept it.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Then we will move forward. Minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes.
We caught the most glaring.
It's kind of
I
funny.
can assure you.
Yeah, so that change will be made, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So do I have a motion to accept the minutes with that particular change?
So moved.
Okay, second. Thank you, all in agreement?
Mm.
Yeah, okay. So no one's here for public comments. Whoops. Thank you.
Runaway pen.
Yeah. All right, so new business. Our team, you want to start the process?
Great.
Overview of policy audit.
Awesome. I'll get my screen shared here, Maddie, and then hand it over to you. Okay, that should be coming through.
Great, and thank you for teeing us up. So the first task that we'll walk through today is the policy audit. And this is one that we're getting started on now. We're almost midstream, making our way through it. Next slide, starting with the goals and objectives. So through this task, basically what we're going to be doing is auditing and summarizing all existing climate-related plans, policies, and regulations locally. So we want to make sure that we're aligned with and building off of all the other the comprehensive plan draft, a lot of other great work that has happened in Lake Forest Park, aligning with any county level plans and making sure that we're taking regional and state guidance into account as well. So we'll compile those plans, policies into a database. We'll use that to identify policy trends, gaps, opportunities, and barriers so that we can take that to the next step and start to think about how it's going to inform policy development for the climate element. This task will also inform the vulnerability and risk assessment that we'll do, and that's where we are thinking about climate impacts and what that means in terms of risk across the Lake Forest Park community. So the context of the policy audit will inform that work, and in turn, analysis tasks like the vulnerability and risk assessment and the greenhouse gas analysis work will also inform the way that we develop climate element policies. So it's a bit of an iterative process of understanding the lay of the land, getting a sense of those opportunities, and figuring out how to build on them. So this will directly inform policy development. That's where we'll fill the gaps, we'll build out opportunities, we'll address barriers via recommended policies, and throughout we'll reference the commerce planning guidance to make sure that we're fully in line with the state requirements for the climate element. So we'll go through step by step what that's going to look like. And our first step is just identifying local plans and policies, making sure that we have a good sense of the core climate-related documents within Lake Forest Park, as well as related documents with goals, with some policies that support the analysis as well. So what we're considering as our core documents are the Lake Forest Park Climate Action Plan, the Comprehensive Plan Draft, Shoreline Master Program, Hazard Mitigation Plan, and the Stormwater Management Program Plan. There are a lot of other great plans within the city that support things like transportation, natural systems, solid waste management, parks and open space. So we've got a list of other documents that will take a little bit less of a detailed look at, but want to make sure that we take into account and we're acknowledging those goals and how all of these plans are interrelated. So this is the full list of documents that we've worked with Mark to identify, and Drew and Corey as well. And this is what we're in the middle of now, is reviewing those documents. So what's next is compiling all of the policies into a database, and we will code any individual policy, where it's found, what the relevant climate element sector, as commerce defines it, is going to be, so that we're just really organizing them based on the commerce guidance and what that climate element might look like. And just keeping really close track of kind of what climate impacts it's going to address, and making even initial recommendations about whether we'll keep a policy, kind of migrate it into a climate element policy, amend it, to just really keep track of our notes for that policy development phase. That data.
Can you read those?
Sure.
Can you read the top categories across the top that so you're looking at these policies in terms of source? I can't read the other ones.
Sure. It says source document. Each one has a unique ID number so that we can refer to it. There's a jurisdiction, so that tells us whether basically a policy is at the local level or the county level. The strategy
So-
itself, so the policy.
These all say Kenmore on it. So
No,
I'm just
this is just an
confused.
example,
Oh, okay, got it.
just for reference, since we are still very much in the initial phases of policy for Lake Forest Park.
Okay.
Great, and I think this is even a clipped screenshot. We'll keep track of a few different elements in the database as well. So we'll keep track of all of those policies, and we'll have a separate page of the database that adds up the policies and what sectors and climate impacts they're related to, so that we can just really see almost a dashboard of the number of policies that are related to buildings and energy, transportation and land use, sustainability, sustainable consumption, and other topics within the commerce list of sectors for the climate element. So that'll give us even just a quick visual snapshot of what some of the gaps and opportunities might be to fill in those sectors. And we'll type up the results into a summary memo. So we won't just take the table at face value, but we'll take a closer look and draft a policy memo that includes all of the trends, gaps, opportunities, and barriers. And then importantly, we'll bring it back to all of you and city staff and see if it matches your understanding of the city and see if we're accurately characterizing what you know about trends, opportunities, gaps, as well as any lessons learned as these policies have been implemented. We know that some of these plans are newer than others, so you might have valuable lessons to share about what has worked and what has not worked in Lake Forest Park. So we expect that our next touch point with you all will be in mid to late December, December 18th, I believe, is the next CPAT meeting. So we'll be excited to have a draft to share at that point.
Great.
And then, yeah.
Will you be posting that, when you said you were posting? Will we be able, in the previous slide, you had those things that were filled out for Kenmore. Will we have that access to that information?
I think it's in your inbox right now. 2
I
hours
think,
ago.
Oh, well, geez.
No,
Sarah, are you referencing the database and the table that Maddie was showing on this slide? So the
Yes.
question is, will we be able to share the database with the CPAT?
Will we just get an overview memo or will we be able to see the full list?
Actually, what I would like to do is be able to dig down into that. I would like to see that policy database. Are you planning on sharing that with us?
We certainly can if you'd like. I think our intention with sharing the memo is something that's a little bit easier to digest. But if you'd like to see the workbook, we'll certainly be providing that to the city and could send that your way.
Great.
A peek behind the curtain.
Just live on the website.
Yeah, I don't want it. I just want to look at it.
Is that possible, Alexandra or Maddie, for this data
Sure.
analysis?
Absolutely, yeah.
Seems like that would be the best place for everything to be located for all of us to access that content and then also the public.
And Zoom to intent.
Exactly. A question I have is, and you may have already answered this question, but what's your guiding question as you're doing this gap analysis or this policy audit analysis? What's your guiding question?
That's a good question. I think we're thinking about largely the commerce guidance and making sure that the sectors are kind of filled out. I think we're referencing any goals that we see in the comprehensive plan and the climate element, and making sure that we're aiming no less ambitious than any of those goals. I think that's a good starting point. It's just really the commerce guidance and matching the level of ambition that we're seeing in the city.
this might be a good spot to park a memory. Too soon to write down, but not to be forgotten. the outcomes of the initiatives. So the silver lining, Climate Commitment Act,
Yes,
still there.
still
The
there.
guidance still good, but one task we have to add over this year is the natural gas.
Yeah,
So there'll be time, but there will be a task of eliminating anything in this draft that goes contrary to that initiative. You can advocate for heat pumps all day long. You just can't advocate for heat pumps to the detriment of natural gas. And then the lawyers will be sure we stay on the good side of that.
we can adopt language that is more or less in accord with current legislation. You know, in accord with current rules and regulations, so can't go past what the law is. But we can encourage.
So, but can't take that from us.
For
There's
sure.
just, we're gonna wait at the local level for the SBCC to work on building codes. And then we have the luxury of this year-long effort to make sure that whatever guidance comes out, consistent with the vote on natural gas, that we stay out of litigation. But that shouldn't hinder any policy or implementation items from the Climate Commitment Act.
Okay.
What exactly do you want on the parking list though, or on parking?
That throughout this, we have a lens of whatever could be contrary to denigrating natural gas, you know, discouraging natural gas. That it's not incorporated into this document. There will be eyes at the end looking at all jurisdictions for that very thing.
So it's one of the lenses that we have to look into.
Yeah. But we have time.
Okay. Thank you, Maddie.
For
Should
sure.
Go on to the next item.
Awesome. Yeah. And any other questions for Maddie about the policy audit or anything else you'll want to have for us to keep in mind? Like, please let us know, but we'll plan to bring this back on our December agenda. Any final thoughts, Maddie, before we shift gears?
No, thanks for those questions. We'll be excited to report back in about a month.
Okay.
I love data. I'm excited to see it.
Love me a good color coded spreadsheet,
Dude.
so I'm glad you asked.
Amazing.
Bunch of geeks in here.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks, Maddie. Appreciate it. Are you sticking around or gonna sign off for the evening?
Ooh, I'm happy to stick around if helpful.
Okay, we're diving into the engagement plan, so totally up to you. But I think I'm taking the baton here, y'all. So I think what you do have in your email inboxes is the full draft as a Word document of the engagement plan. And we spoke about this during our October meeting as a preview. We'd done some preliminary work to start developing the engagement plan in October, but we didn't have anything to share with you at that time. And during the October meeting, you asked specifically that we bring this draft back to you. So we're doing that. We're here today. And we sent this out with a couple days notice before this meeting, just to start the review process. And then I also just want to acknowledge that we know you probably didn't have a chance to read that full document. That's a-okay. So what I'm hoping to do tonight is kind of walk through some of those key components with you all, make time for any questions, discussion, and then we'll welcome your feedback and any written comments or edits you have through November 27th tentatively. So you can feel free to email me those comments directly. Any questions before we dive into the engagement plan?
Just a process question. Do you prefer to walk through the plan and then open up for questions, or would you like for us to ask questions while you're going through the process or the plan.
Yeah, that is a great question. I think the way that I have this set up for you all is the slides are kind of by section. So I think like I'll welcome kind of any questions or comments as we go through. And I don't have slides for all of the sections of the plan. So once we get through the sections I do have, we can kind of open it up for broader questions. Does that sound okay?
Okay.
I see a thumbs up. Great.
Good.
Okay, awesome. So the first section here on the slide, we've got the goals and objectives for engagement. Ultimately, we want to raise awareness of the climate element and provide the opportunity for folks to participate in this planning process. We want to ensure community participation, especially from overburdened communities, vulnerable populations, and historically underserved populations, by providing accessible, authentic, and transparent options to participate. We're hoping to ask for feedback, input where public feedback can contribute to the process of developing those goals and policies. And then we want to ultimately synchronize the climate element engagement activities with previous engagement that happened as part of the comprehensive plan update, middle housing, and the climate action plan. So we're ensuring alignment, efficiency, and avoiding burnout. Any concerns or comments on the goals and objectives here?
Yeah, I had a couple. When I looked at, when it was written up, you sent us to Appendix A, which was a series of maps to look at what our underserved population was. And I didn't tell me anything. Do you have a sense of what, you had 6 or 8 maps there that were sort of, and I didn't know what those maps told us.
Great, good question. So I'm going to pull up the Appendix A on the screen here, and I think I'll answer part of your question, Sarah, and then we may be coming back to this a little bit in our December meeting. But ultimately, this community profile is basically just a snapshot of demographics. So the first section has got some tables with percentages of the population. And then what you're speaking about, I believe, are the maps for social vulnerability. And these maps will be part of the vulnerability assessment process. So for now, they're kind of reference materials. We have them if we need them, and we can refer back to them. And we'll be able to dig into the data like as needed. But basically, it's showing a number of different layers of socioeconomic factors, both from the Washington Health Disparities Map, which I believe are figures 1 through 5. And then the second set is the CDC Social Vulnerability Index. And so that's a federal database. And it has slightly different categories and levels.
I don't know what it tells you. Because they're in what must be census blocks, or it doesn't point, does it point, are you reading those in a way that say, oh, well, we really know we need to do one in my neighborhood?
I mean, I can speak to what I see in them, a number of them, especially the ones near the end, the last few, have the highest levels of vulnerability in a number of categories.
Yeah.
The areas that are darkest are areas where we have the limited higher density housing we do. So down towards 145th is where I'm seeing repeated places that it is listed as higher levels of vulnerability in different places. So thinking about, as we're doing outreach, making sure that we're including folks who are in the apartments and other things that are further towards the south end of Lake Forest Park. That's what I see in this, is that like outreach in the town center area is great. And we have a particular pocket of our city that is listed in multiple ways as being potentially more vulnerable.
Okay. I agree with you, but I mean, do you think it's just the public housing? I mean, because, some of those people are living, are certainly not vulnerable.
I would agree with Sarah that when you, the census block that includes the King County subsidized housing block. That's actually one of our most densely populated community. And the presence of that housing authority unit affects the ranking of that entire census block. Even though there's almost a bimodal distribution of people who live in that housing authority complex and the rest of the census block. And so that has to be understood as we're looking at vulnerabilities. Even though census block seems like a small unit to work with, and it's absolutely convenient because that's how the data are compiled. It is actually disguising an even more important micro trend within that census block. So how we address that is challenging, in part because
It is.
yeah, it simply is. It's a community where outreach is quite challenging. Haven't tried.
Okay, I'm just saying that sometimes they don't lead us.
So my understanding is from what I read in this plan is that you will be doing a vulnerability analysis. Correct? And that this data is just the starting point for that vulnerability analysis.
Okay.
Yes, and I would say to build on the point that Anne was making too, is that the community profile, the reason we included it as an appendix is like, it can be really helpful data, but it's not perfect. It's not the be all end all. It doesn't add, to Anne's point, those like micro trends. And what we're hoping to do is, like, in working with you all, is start to peel back the layers, get more of that context. What are we not seeing in the data, to better understand the Lake Forest Park community? So I think they're a starting place, and we hope to peel back more of the layers. Go ahead, David, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that we just want to hold that conversation. We'll come back to it. I think a lot, yeah.
Okay, great. Any other like thoughts or concerns or reflections on the engagement objectives and goals on the slide here?
So I do have a clarification question maybe. I'm looking at these goals and objectives, and I'm asking to what end, right? It seems to me that our overall goal is the development and implementation of the climate element, right? That's our goal. And that it's, so once it's developed, once it's implemented through policies and goals, then your job becomes easier, right? So it seems to me though, what's missing though is that implementation piece. Does that make sense?
Could I offer a thought? And that is, if a community understands why it wants to accomplish goals and objectives, then the implementation is easier. And so this outreach plan that connects with the community and has an opportunity to have two-way communication will make implementation more straightforward, because there will be, democracy works best when the government is reflecting the will of the people, and the people believe that their government is doing what they want.
Right. But that's clearly, that's articulated here, right? But I just want to make sure that our goal is very clear, like what our purpose is the implementation, the development and the implementation.
Well, and yes, but the important part, and especially the plan review, this is high level goal policy like what we just did for the comprehensive plan and planning commission. What's already in place is normally what comes after, which is the climate action plan. So I'd say right now, what's missing in that range from vision, to implementation is the policy.
The
We
policy.
started, yeah, and so the emphasis is more policy,
Mhm.
but this process will inform the implementations, but I would say the climate action plan's pretty strong on implementation.
Okay, okay, great. So though, it's the policy piece though that's missing for me then, this. In the overall goals,
As a deliverable.
as a deliverable, yeah. I mean, otherwise, it's great.
Okay.
But there's a lot of legislation. One comes to mind, when I'm sitting with Commerce at 60-day review on the draft, we need to meet legislation, so environmental justice. Is that reflected in the policies or informed into your implementation? The HEAL Act, all that, all those kind of subcategories. It's not just formulate our policy and throw it in a book, but it's integration specific to climate.
And we're not the only group working on this. King County obviously is working closely with the residents in the King County Housing Authority. And that is currently the largest solar panel array in our city. Bar none. So there's many things to pull together as we go forward, but when it comes to policy and particularly outreach and engagement with different parts of our community, we should be aware we're not the only players on the field. We have teammates who are working towards that same endpoint and are sometimes leaps and bounds ahead of what the city itself could possibly accomplish.
Okay.
My clarifying point is in if there should be policy or implementation in the goals and objectives. I see that this is a different title on the slide than I see in the slide deck that I'm viewing, and I don't know when it changed, but specify goals and objectives for engagement and the engagement piece, not goals and objectives for.
That's great. Yes, thank you for clarifying. that.
Yes.
So in the context of goals and objectives for engagement, these 4 goals seem comprehensive to me, at least, in why are we doing the engagement piece
Mhm.
in service of the bigger stuff that's not listed within these goals.
Thanks for flagging that, Victoria. I realized it just said goals and objectives out of context of engagement, and so I added that right before this meeting. Sorry about that. Okay. Are we okay if I shift to the next section here? Okay, great. So I have a couple of slides to walk through on the engagement approaches. So maybe for like 2 or 3 slides, if you can hold thoughts, but I just want to provide an overview. So this is an overview of the engagement approaches. So we'll do promotional materials, a web page, social media, we'll have a community survey, we'll have some group interviews, we'll have a climate-focused open house, a public comment period, and then we'll engage with City Council and Planning Commission. So this is kind of a 30,000-foot level of this. These are the headers that you're seeing in that engagement plan for each of the approaches. And then we showed you this timeline, a slightly different version of this timeline during our first meeting. And I want to just acknowledge, I'll kind of note some of the changes here. So you'll see the public comment period is now happening in the second quarter of 2025, so between March and June, recognizing that we will need to incorporate that public comment into the draft that goes to Commerce. So we shifted that up a bit. We'll also have that open house happening during that time period, as well as likely some precursor meetings if needed with Planning Commission and City Council, just to kind of start laying the groundwork there. And then working backwards in time here, we're planning to have some group interviews, the community survey happening early 2025, and then we have the webpage, creating promotional materials, and the webpage launch happening both at the end of this year and early in 2025. And then similarly, we have these placeholder CPAT meetings down here, which are yet to be officially scheduled, but I did send out those doodle polls earlier today around 5 o'clock. So if you have a chance, please take those polls and we'll get those scheduled for the remainder of our time between now and June. And then just the bookend here of this engagement plan. This is what we're reviewing now, and really excited to get y'all's input to finalize that piece. And then we're also planning to do a brief engagement summary report towards the end of this project, just to kind of highlight what did we do for engagement, who did we engage, how did we engage them, what did we hear, sort of thing, to just wrap up the engagement. And then, so maybe I'll pause and see if there are any questions, because I know this timeline slide is kind of a lot. And then just I'll let you know that I do have slides to kind of walk through each of these phases in a bit more depth. So if it's easier, I can do that and then take questions. Any burning timeline questions? Okay, I see a couple of head shakes. Okay, interrupt me if you do have questions. I'm gonna keep on rolling. So I just spoke about this briefly, but this phase 1 is the kind of project launch and the context setting. That's what we're in now. And the key approaches that we're using here are developing those promotional materials. We started to talk about that a bit during our last meeting, but we're hoping to put together a fact sheet. We'll be creating any flyers or template emails as needed kind of throughout the duration of the project. We'll have the project webpage, which we're hoping to launch later this year with the city, and that can serve as our central hub for materials. It can host the survey, help facilitate that online public comment period. And then as needed, we'll use any social media to help share about these opportunities. And then the timeline for this is launching that website in December tentatively, and then creating promotional materials, and doing website updates and social media throughout the engagement approach process. I'm missing a word there, but it's okay. So this is phase 1. And then phase 2 is to really identify priorities. And so we'll use this community survey as one tool, as well as group interviews. And the survey will include critical topics, such as climate impacts and policy recommendations. So we may, the details of the survey are still pretty open and flexible, but we're hoping to have that survey launch in March. It'll be open to the public, and we'll also kind of target key audiences. And then the group interviews, we're hoping to do kind of 5 online interviews, either online or in person. And those will be an opportunity to engage with a little bit deeper with specific community groups about their input that could inform the climate element. So we're hoping to hold those interviews also in March, kind of concurrent with that survey. And then I'll just put a pin in this group interviews. I want to come back to this a bit, because I think we're hoping to get your thoughts on which community groups or organizations might be good to connect with for the interviews. And then this refining the policy, that should say phase 3. This will be like the open house and the public comment period. And so that open house will be an opportunity for participants to share their feedback, review what we've got, voice any concerns, identify any priorities that'll shape the final draft of the climate element. And we're hoping to have that in late April. And then for public comment, we'll have the public comment period open for about 4 weeks in late April, early May. And that will be an opportunity for folks to comment directly on the draft PDF, and we'll either use a platform called Conveo or consider it. The technical pieces don't matter so much, but that'll be an opportunity for folks online to submit like, hey, I want to see X, Y, or Z added to this section, or I don't understand this policy. So they'll have the space to kind of provide their thoughts directly, and that'll be a 4-week period, and that will happen prior to us submitting the full draft to Planning Commission by June 15th. And then lastly, I mentioned this briefly earlier, but will be the role for city council and planning commission. Planning commission will ultimately be making that recommendation to city council. And the timeline here is a bit squishy, kind of early to mid 2025. And we'll take our cue from you all on when it's time to engage planning commission and city council. So I'm going to pause and see if you have any questions, comments, feedback on kind of the overall approaches we're planning to lean on for engagement here.
I have just a super quick request, and that's when anything is posted on social media or shared, is it possible for this team to get a proactive ping? I'm gonna be honest, I don't follow our city social media super closely, but would like to be able to boost or amplify if things are posted, be able to repost or into other community groups and things like that.
Is direct mailing part of this,
No,
like sending something?
we are not currently planning to use direct mailing, but we can talk about that if it's a successful strategy.
It's really challenging to reach everybody. Social media, I don't think is a way to reach everybody, it reaches certain people.
Yeah.
So I just feel like it's really hard. And that survey that you guys sent out, I think is really effective. It's gotten to everybody.
Yeah, and I had the follow-up postcard.
Yeah.
So if you lost one thing, you could find the other, which
Right.
was really great. So potentially considering postcard, not postcard size mailer, not 8 pages of 8.5 by 11 glossy
That's-
color.
Right. A postcard with a QR code for more information or something to the website, or just informing people what is going on.
I don't know if that's in the budget. But if it is, then
It will be. That's and I see Stacy has a question, but to capture the survey, glad is there, the timing is perfect, yes, please, citywide, we'll find the budget. It's about $5,000 just for printing and posting. It worked for comprehensive plan, and the evidence is now that we've had 3 or 4 or 5 meetings at council, we've resolved the public comment is not, what are you doing? I didn't know about it. I don't understand it. I know you're gonna adopt it in 3 weeks. What are you doing to us? So I think that's very important for this.
Yeah.
I do too, because otherwise you get this where you do a survey and you have the most number of people, and then the 100 people who come to your open house, suddenly their voice is more important than the other people because they're there. And of course, and then you're funneling it down further and further. So that I think the hard part is to keep that open so that the people whose butts and seats aren't more influential. I don't know, maybe they should be, but I mean, I think that's the drama that we're having is how do you in this process, how do we keep expanding it instead of making it smaller and smaller in terms of the people? But I think sending out a postcard is a great idea. What's your return on your?
So if we have 13,700 residents, we received almost 1,000 responses, which is unheard of.
Yeah, 5,000 households, right? You said 1 to a household.
Yeah,
Oh, good.
so there's
We
some
know that in my
dynamics,
house.
but more or less. It was very effective. It
Yeah.
was more than the 100 or so that we
Yeah.
normally get.
Yeah. So,
Did Stacy's question get answered?
It wasn't really a question, it was more like a note that I think we have a city newsletter we could sort of take advantage of as well if the budget wasn't there to do direct mailing.
Stacy, do you mind repeating yourself? We're just having a hard time hearing.
I'm so sorry. I'll try to, is that better?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just got closer to my microphone. I was just trying to suggest that there's a newsletter we have, a city newsletter that we might take advantage of for direct mailing, if we wanted to sort of do something there as well.
Thanks, Stacy. Yeah, and I think Mark sent out a note through one of the newsletters, I believe a couple weeks ago, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mark.
E-news,
E-news.
I'm guessing this monthly, I don't know, it happens so quickly. Seems like every day I get that email, and then the quarterly newsletter, so it'll be in both those.
Okay.
and what about using the Shoreline Area News?
Yes,
Who's the yes guy today?
I have my issues with that, yeah, I really wish they would ask the right questions, use the information.
Well, I mean, or I didn't say next door.
Yeah. It's, and so official notices and public hearings, they go to the Seattle Times as newspaper of record. And I'm always available for a phone call and a conversation for somebody writing a letter or writing a news story. I encourage them to call.
Great. Oh yeah, hi Anne, I see your hand. Thanks.
Yeah, is this a time to talk about the community groups you identified, or is that later?
I think this is a great time. Yeah, and we can kind of pop around here. So go ahead.
I really want to thank you for going to our climate action plan and the community survey and identifying the top groups that were identified by people in terms of where they got their news.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I don't think some of these are appropriate at all. I mean, what you did is anyone who you did, this is every group that was identified twice or more. And I would say after you go south of League of Women Voters, you're starting to move outside of our community. And I am open to identifying a group such as Front and Center that may be helpful in guiding us to interacting more effectively with our frontline communities. Understanding that our frontline communities include King County Housing Authority, but also a relatively significant portion of older residents who are living in rented multifamily housing and rarely attend our public meetings. We've had limited outreach. So I think you've looked at the demographics of the city to recognize that we are not as diverse as some other communities in the Seattle area. And our diversity is often age-based. So it's a different challenge. But I would argue that Save Shoreline Trees is not active in our community. Puget Sound Aquarium is a wonderful organization that is not active in our community. 350 Seattle is very focused on Seattle, and the actions that they're pursuing are not necessarily relevant. And the Stop the Money pipeline is, I don't feel it's really applicable to what we're doing here. It's a very nice group, no question. I would also put an asterisk by Save Shoreline Trees.
And what is the, now that we, whatever this list is, what are you gonna do with it?
Yeah, so this is the starting place of the community groups that were identified both in the climate action plan and then also in our discussion during the October CPAT. So we'd welcome, just like Anne offered, like who's missing from this list? What additional community groups should be on our radar? Should we be reaching out to? I mentioned the group interviews that we're going to be conducting. Like, are there groups on this list that would be like ripe for a group interview or have, like be a good starting place? Like, hey, you should get in touch with folks from, like, for example, this.
Spreadsheet, a Google sheet with a whole list of groups.
Today?
No, earlier, like a few days.
Oh, yes,
ago.
you did, yes.
Yeah, I'm going to point out, People for Climate Action in Lake Forest Park is entirely redundant with Stewardship Foundation, Stream Keepers, and really the city council committees, the city committees that are working on this. And Rotary, there's a complete overlap. But so it's duplicative, and it has stopped meeting because it was duplicative.
Yeah, I'll send you a list of the ones I had, and they're, I mean, I could, the garden club is filled with people who are concerned about their gardens and the climate impact on their gardens. Pretty active on that. The Rotary, there's also the Environmental Rotary Club of Puget Sound.
I think the overall, just the business community of Lake Forest Park is missing on some.
Third Place Commons runs the client chamber of the commons.
Yeah,
So they have a business meeting, so you could contact them through that.
but I think business should be identified
Hmm.
as listed on the that we're paying attention to the business needs in this community.
Absolutely.
They are one of the segments within one slide up in the audiences. One of the external partner segments is businesses.
Mhm.
And does the Presbyterian Church have a climate committee?
You
I
don't
think the Rotary's
necessarily,
meeting there.
I mean, focusing on people who already care is one thing, but everybody else is important too, because everybody should care.
Yeah,
Well, I have a very long list. I mean, I'm gonna read my list out loud to this group. So I have the Garden Club, the Climate Action Town Hall group, the Climate Hub group, which is quite small still. The boards and commissions, the Environmental Rotary Club, the sewer districts have newsletters, the utility districts have newsletters, the Civic Club, the Presbyterian Church, the Block Watch, and I have a list of the condos and apartment buildings in around town and the contacts there. So Valentin, Forest Springs, Sequoia, Watercrest, Sheridan Beach Terrace, Woodland North, 12 degrees. So those are sort of sources, but I wasn't sure what if they were a key audience or they were a leftover audience, and what were they an audience for?
So Alexandra, how would you like this list?
In terms of the list that Sarah read off?
Just the
Yeah,
these.
I mean, I think I'd welcome, like, if any of those organizations you read off you think are ripe audiences for hearing about the climate element and climate policies that Lake Forest Park is developing. We would love to know, like, which groups we should prioritize, and who's missing. So, like, the list we just talked through, like, if should stream keepers be our starting place? Like, getting a sense for, like, I think I've heard a couple of times that Third Place Commons is like a no-brainer, like that's an absolute must in terms of engagement. But, any sort of additional context that you have about who the key groups are, or like, is one group kind of more connected than another?
So the Stewardship Foundation, so Stream Keepers is kind of a subsidiary of the Stewardship Foundation.
Okay. And you don't need to watch me live edit, but I would say in sending your list over, Sarah, and others, if there are other additions you have. Although did we lose them? Maddie and Stacy?
I can hear you, Alexandra, but you're right. They seem frozen.
Oh yeah. Oh, there.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's possible because, and we're still recording. But it's possible that they lost power. We're having this, I think you guys probably are too, having this terrible storm coming in.
Totally. I can hear the wind.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna mute myself for a second and call Mark.
Nice.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, they're trying to get back online. But we're gonna just sit tight for a minute here and hope they join. Mark's gonna call me back in a minute.
Sounds good, Alexandra. Really quickly, I put in the chat a way to reach out to our schools, but I didn't mean children. I just meant a teachers association, because I don't know if there's a way for them to convey sort of the ideas and policies to parents and kids over time. But just a suggestion. That's my only suggestion.
There we just had plan B and now we don't need it. Yeah.
Welcome back.
So to start with your question. I think that was a good question. So
Right.
we're muddling the, yeah.
Yeah. So trying to figure out in terms of identifying community groups and who we should be talking to, my question for you, Alexandra, is. How much, it seems like our conversation is going back and forth between generally people we should talk to and make sure know this is happening and get feedback from at some point. And it seemed like you were specifically asking for like, for the focus groups in particular, are there some discrete groups to talk to for that specific piece of this? How much do you want us to just tell you all of the people to talk to and then you can figure out the best ones for each thing? Or how much do you want us to actually like focus in right now and give you focus groups, specific discrete groups for that purpose?
Great. Thank you for that question. I would love to hear for those 5 interviews that we have from your perspectives, where and how should we focus that time? So the latter part of your question, like instead of giving me the laundry list of all the groups in Lake Forest Park, which I think is a great email-based task, which of the groups would you like us to focus those 5 hours with? And this can be kind of an ongoing conversation too. So we can start it today. If we don't finish it, if we don't identify it, that's totally fine. But I'd love to just hear kind of if there are any like must-haves. Who are those groups? Who are those folks?
Is this something that would happen at the beginning of the process or later when we have something that we want feedback on? That kind of, for me, it's
Feedback. Yeah, so right now we have the group interviews roughly happening in March. So we would potentially have some draft policies at that point. We'd have the results of the climate vulnerability assessment. So we'd have a bit more content to be engaging with them on.
So they're phase 2 out of 3 on the map.
so be feedback on the preliminary.
Yes, but not necessarily on a full, like, here's our draft, tell us what you think it would be. I'm guessing bits and pieces of things, and this is the direction we're going. What information or feedback do you have to guide the rest of our drafting process? Is that correct on where it's at?
So someone at this point, we're at 8:11. And if we could like put this conversation on the side so that we can get to the other agenda items, come back to this, because it seems like we're saying it's kind of in phase 2, right? That these focus groups will come together. But keeping this in, put this on the list so that we can come back to it. Would that be okay?
Yes, and
Okay.
I will, hopefully you can hear me. You're cutting out a little bit in the room. So I think what I heard, David, is that we'll put this on the list of follow-up items. I would ask maybe as CPAT members if you can be thinking about this, moving forward, and please share this, by email in your review. That would be really helpful. But yeah, we can shift on to our next agenda item. Are you still am I still here?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. Just have to make sure that the tech check is there.
Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Okay. Great, just making sure we don't lose that action item. Great, and I'm gonna reshare my screen here. And I think, yeah, David, are we ready to move into our third kind of topic on the climate impacts piece?
So just a quick question, any other questions about the engagement plan?
Yep, I'm sorry. Yes, the key messages. I don't think they're very compelling. I mean, I think climate is, your hair's on fire. My hair's on fire about climate, and I don't think these key messages reflect that. So just pass that on.
Can I bring up a question that will come up in December? If we're going to a survey in January, February, do you have an example or a set that we can draft to local conditions to capture comments like that? Ask meaningful questions without starting from scratch.
Yes.
The wordsmithing of those questions takes the longest time of the survey.
Yes. Absolutely.
If we can, if we can bring the engagement plan back as a December item and finalize it, but know that we can start that survey kind of element early internally, that would help.
Yeah, and I would also just note that our hope with the engagement plan is that if we can, you know, get it to a point where it's good enough, like good enough is what we're hoping for. It will never be perfect. So, and I think it won't get to the level of detail like building out the actual survey questions. Like that is something we do in implementing the engagement plan, to your point there, Mark. So, and yes, we can bring the build a draft from other examples. And then to your point, Sarah, about the key messages, I think I just want to acknowledge we know those are imperfect, and we would welcome any kind of additional content you think you'd like to see there, any tailoring you'd like to do to Lake Forest Park. If anything, any key messaging worked really well during the climate action plan process, I would love to hear that. But this is a great time. I welcome any and all feedback on how to improve those key messages. So just hoping that's an open door for any additional input there.
Is that cool? So,
Yes, I don't, I just, yes.
okay. Good.
Okay. Anything else on the engagement plan before we shift gears? Just a reminder, if you have any additional kind of feedback or comments, please send those to me in the next week or so. I'm hopefully you'll send comments by the 27th, but recognizing there's a Thanksgiving holiday, if it needs to be in early December, that is also totally fine. So please let me know if you need more time. We can make that happen. Okay. Great. Ready to shift into the climate impacts?
There was one other discussion question that I don't think we touched on here, which was the need for translation. In all the outreach that you all did on the climate action plan work, did you do any translation or hear a need for it from the community?
We
You
didn't,
knocked on doors more.
but we didn't do it.
Okay.
And we didn't do translation. We didn't, nobody,
Nobody asked. Or
No.
we didn't.
How often does the city do materials in multiple languages?
That question actually came up from City Council about a week ago, and the answer was we could provide that if you direct it and fund it.
Okay.
But with environmental justice outreach, it could be made part of this effort. So notices, but it's very limited. It's not translating your entire document.
Do we know what the need is? Maybe we.
As a group, you could work with Cascadia and identify it with their data. And then maybe choose the most prominent.
The demographic data in the report that was sent is feels inconclusive as to what would be helpful.
right.
Exactly, Victoria. We're hoping to kind of hear from you all. Like it wasn't clear that, okay, we should translate into Spanish. It looks like there's a bit of gray area in the data. So I think that's where we're kind of looking to previous efforts.
I think the elementary schools would be the key for answering that question.
We should ask, and I think if we ask at the elementary schools, we'll probably have a better sense. I know my own personal experience going to doors. definitely run into some Spanish language speakers and the King County Elections has a list of languages that they translate ballots into. And so I've had some success going, you know, when I'm trying to communicate with somebody, asking them to point to the language that I should be using. And I got several responses in Korean at one point. But I haven't talked to everybody in Lake Forest Park by a long shot. So
There's nothing here that says how many, what percentage don't speak English at all.
Right.
most of our, it
says 87% do speak.
Speak only English.
speak only English.
14,
That's
Yes.
what that's
14.3%.
speak,
says
other
Speak
than
a
English
second
at
language.
home, but that doesn't mean they don't speak English.
Yeah, they speak another language in the home, but if maybe very much as my father and my grandmother. My grandmother never really learned to speak English and her children did all the translating for her.
So I think this is another question. I
And you would learn that through the schools.
think that's a good avenue.
So shoreline, most of our district is in shoreline schools. We have a small number of households in the northeast corner that go to North Shore School District. We may be able to get the information directly from shoreline schools.
Yes, they can, they have that. That'd be easy to get.
I'm sorry,
It's easy to get.
there you
There's a
go.
guy who does demographics in
Yeah.
the school.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay. Well, was that a question? Sorry, I missed that.
No, we're ready
Okay.
for climate impacts.
Ready for climate impacts. Excellent. Okay, so I am really excited to share some of the preliminary results of climate impacts. And I just want to note that, like, you know, as we go through this, please make note of any questions you have, any reflections, anything you'd like more information on. And I'll kind of collect all of that info, those questions, and we'll be discussing this further in December. So I may not be able to answer all of your questions tonight. I'm presenting on behalf of our staff who are doing the climate impacts assessment here, but I'm going to do my best. So I want to provide a bit more context on kind of what the climate vulnerability assessment process is, and why we do it. So ultimately, the outcomes of this climate vulnerability assessment will inform the climate element by informing us about specific communities and locations that are likely already experiencing climate impacts or will experience climate impacts. We'll use future projections to understand the impacts in addition to historical data, and we'll illustrate holistic and overlapping impacts of climate changes. And on the bottom here, you can see the timeline. So we're in this stage with this laser pointer here, kind of like in this kind of purple to green zone of reviewing available research and plans and starting to develop the climate impact summary. And that will inform the vulnerability assessment, both the draft and the final, and then those findings will be integrated into the final climate element goals and policies. So the first part of our approach to understanding climate impacts in Lake Forest Park is really building from the Department of Commerce steps for the resilience sub-element. And so we're in the drafting phase of the climate impact summary, and we're using things like climate impact groups data, the climate mapping for a resilient Washington web tool, as well as the other resources listed on the left-hand side of the screen: the Northwest Climate Assessment Report, the National Climate Assessment, the Washington Health Disparities Tool, the University of California Merced Climate Toolbox, and then we're also pulling from existing city documents, such as the climate action plan and documents that Maddie mentioned earlier, coming from the policy audit process, the hazard mitigation plan, and ultimately the climate impacts assessment will involve the following steps. So we've got this first purple box here, moving from left to right. We're assessing climate change impacts by evaluating climate change impacts on key physical, social, and environmental assets using relevant plans, policies, and credible resources. And then we'll be identifying the climate trends and hazards. So using best available science to identify observed and projected climate trends for Lake Forest Park, focusing on flooding, heat events, wildfire, smoke, drought, and other climate-related risks. And then lastly, pairing assets and hazards and identifying priorities. So that will pair the community assets with their anticipated climate impacts, summarize findings, and identify priority climate hazards specific to Lake Forest Park, considering both exposure and non-climate stressors. Okay. So ultimately the purpose of the climate impact summary is to start to identify those historical and projected climate impacts in order to support the gaps and opportunities assessment, and inform the vulnerability assessment. And we've identified kind of 4 primary categories of climate impacts and the associated sectors and oh, we lost them again.
Yeah.
Dang. Okay. Well, for the recording, we've lost the room. These are the 4 climate impacts. Great. I think I'm going to pause. I'm going to mute myself again and stop sharing. Just okay, no answer from Mark. Okay, we lost Stacy too. Oh, there he is.
Wow. Okay. Okay, hanging up.
Okay, how's the audio coming through?
We lost Stacy, but I'll keep an eye out so that she can rejoin.
Okay, great. Well, let's see how this goes, and I will. Yeah, I do want to make sure we can get your questions and comments here. So, okay, I'm gonna walk through, share my screen, and hi, Stacy. Okay, we're jumping back in. So these on the screen here, we're showing the like 4 primary categories of climate impacts, and this we're going to walk through each of these in a bit more, but the 4 are warming temperatures, so experiencing higher annual average temperatures with especially high temperature increases during the summer months, wildfire and smoke, increased wildfire activity due to extreme heat and heightened drought, resulting in increased smoke and poor air quality, drought, declining summer precipitation, leading to frequent, longer, and severe regional droughts. And then lastly, precipitation and inland flooding, increased flooding due to more frequent and intense extreme precipitation events. So we'll walk through each of these, kind of some of the preliminary results, and yeah, we'll just dive in here. Okay, so for warming temperature and extreme heat, Lake Forest Park's annual maximum temperature is projected to increase about 8.3 degrees Fahrenheit under this business as usual scenario by the end of the century. So RCP 8.5 is kind of shorthand for the business as usual scenario. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go forward here. And then this graph is showing an increase of 1.7 degrees Fahrenheit since 1895. Historic summer heat stress has also increased from 1979 to 2024. Maximum temperatures in the city have increased by 2.2 degrees Fahrenheit. And then projected temperature increases are expected to bring more extreme heat events and days per year with a heat index above 105 degrees. For wildfire and smoke, with the likelihood of wildfires in the region, smoke and air quality impacts are likely to affect community health in Lake Forest Park. And this map is a bit confusing. It shows that the kind of darker yellow in Lake Forest Park is, I believe, is the forested area, but because it is in an urban area, it's slightly less likely to be experiencing wildfire than like a more rural area. So on average, Lake Forest Park has a greater current wildfire likelihood than about 6% of communities in the US. So that's quite a small amount. So comparatively, the city has a low likelihood of experiencing wildfire. But there are more frequent wildfires in the region that may lead to lower air quality days. And then the high fire danger days, like the number of days where there's 100-hour fuel moisture is less than the historic 20th percentile, those are expected to increase. So that's expected to increase from 6 days between 2010 and 2039 to 10 days between 2040 and 2069. So this one is kind of like a bit squishy, a bit nuanced, but we're planning to unpack this more in the climate impacts assessment.
Because it seems that if you had forests, you could have forest fires.
Yes, agreed. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so on for drought in the Northwest, summer precipitation is projected to decline under all scenarios, contributing to more frequent, longer, and more severe regional drought conditions that will then increase wildfire risk and decrease water availability. So on the screen here, you're seeing both the business as usual scenario in orange. That's where's my laser pointer? That's the orange piece here, and then this blue is RCP 4.5. I'm not sure what the associated greenhouse gas emissions with that is, but that's more of like the midpoint. And Maddie, if you know, you can chime in, but I don't want to put you on the hot seat there. But for drought, the projected temperature increase will raise the likelihood of precipitation. The likelihood that precipitation will fall as rain instead of snow, reducing water storage in our snowpack. And then just noting here, these two bullets, that the legal definition used to determine drought declaration is 75% of normal water supply, with April 1 snowpack being a key consideration. And so then we have on the bottom bullet, the likelihood that King County April 1st snowpack will be 75% of the average, will kind of increase here from 57% in the mid-century to 83% in the end of the century. And then lastly is precipitation and inland flooding. So seasonal precipitation projections are expected to vary seasonally west of the Cascades. However, a majority of models are projecting an increase in precipitation for winter, spring, and fall, and a decrease in precipitation in the summer. So that's where we're seeing on the yellow is summer and is decreasing between now and the end of the century. And then these top three are increasing. Okay, I want to pause and see kind of if there are any reflections or questions that you want to flag for these four climate impacts.
Yes, this is Anne. I'm surprised that there's no mention of extreme cold events, ice storms, freezing, because we have had them in the past, and they're highly disruptive. And with weather weirding, I kind of expect to have weird weather. So I'm surprised that it isn't on the list.
So extreme precipitation events are here on this.
Yeah, extreme precipitation would be, for instance, groundwater flooding. If we get a nice atmospheric river come in, but that's not the same as.
No, I wasn't saying it. I was just saying that it seems like you have considered extreme events in some context. And you thinking that should be its own category? That's kind of what I think. Like extreme of everything.
A lot of the time in this area, the tie between cold events and climate change is just a little bit more mixed in the data. It's not as clear a climate change story as with some of these other factors. So there are definitely some sources that say exactly what you're saying, that all kinds of precipitation and storms will be more varied. There will likely be more cold events, but other data sources don't tend to agree as much. So it's just not quite as strong of a finding as the four key ones pulled out here.
So we're not able to say that we expect more weird migrations of the polar vortex, more cold water drainage down the Fraser River affecting climate.
Not as confidently as these other climate impacts. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say, like, what we're trying to do with this climate impact summary is really try to localize the climate impacts that Lake Forest Park will be experiencing. So I think, Anne, to your point, like the National Climate Assessment, like IPCC report, like there are like other great, very qualified climate scientists doing that kind of modeling and making those statements.
In my neighborhood, we've had periods where for 3 or 4 days, nobody could get up the very minor slope on our street because of the ice. And it wasn't because the city wasn't trying to help, they couldn't get up the road to get to us to put any salt or grit down. And power was down all over, and we were checking on our neighbors to make sure that people were warm and fed. Because we didn't have power, and we couldn't leave the neighborhood, and did everybody have their medicine?
Eventually,
So-
maybe the story will be more evident though.
Yeah.
I think is what
Yeah.
So I appreciate that we can't say that right now, and I'm happy to move on, but based on my personal experience, I expect more extreme winter events also.
Okay. Thanks, Anne.
And the same thing for the hot temperatures, is that they're gonna be extreme hot, and I think, isn't there data for that? That there will be more,
And
Like-
they did show us that more 105+ degree days.
okay,
Yeah,
From 6 to 10 days.
Other questions or pieces that you might see are as missing that you want us to be reflecting in the climate impact summary?
Just a note here that the findings of our climate impact summary largely build on the findings of the climate action plan as well. There's a chapter about climate impacts in the climate action plan, and just a lot of the same key findings are resonating and coming up in the data sources that we checked. So glad to see that alignment.
Thanks, Maddie.
I guess my question, and if this isn't the right place, but sort of the impacts of those on people's lives. So you're
Mm.
likely to have more asthma. Does that show up in smoke, and you're likely to have new ways of planting your yard and taking care of that? Does that show up someplace else?
Great question, Sarah. And you've transitioned. I'm going to use your question and answer it as I speak more about this, how this climate impacts summary will inform our climate vulnerability assessment. So on the screen here is the definition of climate vulnerability. It's the state of susceptibility to harm from exposure to stresses associated with environmental and social change, and from the absence of the capacity to adapt. So we're going to break that down a bit, and I think this will answer your question, Sarah, but if not, I'll check back in with you. So on the screen here, you're seeing the framework that we use for to quantify climate vulnerability. So we start with exposure on here's my pointer, on this side of the screen. So exposure is the degree to which a system is exposed to climate hazards. So for example, coastal areas in towns and cities that are projected to experience sea level rise will have higher exposure to coastal flooding than inland cities. And then sensitivity is the degree to which that system is likely to be affected by climate change. So for example, older adults may be less able to regulate their body temperatures and thus more physically sensitive to extreme heat than younger folks. And then we consider the adaptive capacity. So that is the ability to moderate the damage of, cope with, or adjust to climate change. An example of this is having access to a vehicle and health insurance, which can increase people's adaptive capacity to manage health impacts from extreme heat, smoke, and any injuries related to climate change. And so we put those three factors together, and that gives us vulnerability. So exposure and sensitivity increase vulnerability, while adaptive capacity decreases vulnerability. So Sarah, I want to check back in and see if the way that we kind of consider and calculate climate vulnerability is answering your question, or if there's more that you want to dig into, or if I've missed.
I think it answers my question, but I'm a much more concrete thinker than this. I like to have, disease and stuff that sort of illustrates this. And I think that adaptive capacity as a category, we've talked a lot about resiliency. Is resiliency the same as adaptive capacity?
Maddie, I'll let you chime in if you have any additional thoughts here, but so ultimately, like the climate vulnerability assessment will inform like how we develop resilience policies. So I don't think it's like fully the same, but they could be interpreted the same. We're not using them interchangeably here. We're using adaptive capacity specifically.
I think they're often used interchangeably, but adaptive capacity is the specific technical term for this part of the analysis that describes existing conditions. When we talk about resilience, it can include current resilience, future resilience, resilience policies, and it's just a little bit more of a general term to basically convey much of the same thing. It's just a little bit less specific.
Okay. Great. And then I'll just share, I think this is the last slide before kind of discussion question slide, is just a quick overview of the structure of the vulnerability assessment. And we're going to be talking more about this probably at both our December and our January CPAT meetings. But typically when we do these vulnerability assessments, we will organize them by either sector or hazard. To better analyze the climate risk, the adaptive capacity, and ultimately how to address vulnerability. And so examples of sectors might be energy, buildings and public infrastructure, public health and community well-being, ecosystems and water resources, transportation, land use, and economic development, among others. And then some examples of hazards might be extreme heat, drought, wildfire and smoke, and the flooding and extreme precipitation. So we'll be considering those as part of the structure to our vulnerability assessment.
And where did those examples come from? Is that something that the Department of Commerce?
Yeah, the sectors on the top in the green row there are kind of a subset of sectors from the commerce guidance. And usually we'll work with the jurisdiction to kind of tailor and adapt and identify which are the most important or relevant sectors to a community. So that would be something we would work with you all on.
It's a good starting point.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Well, yeah, and I think our hope tonight is to just start to kind of expose you to some of these, some of what we found so far, our preliminary thinking, start to plant the seeds on what the vulnerability assessment is, so that when we bring this back to you in either December or January, we can continue the conversation and it won't be a surprise. Okay, well, I think what I'd love to just, I put these two discussion questions on the slides that you should have in front of you. But if you have any specific experiences or resources that you'd like us to kind of be aware of that can help build our understanding of climate impacts in Lake Forest Park, please share that with us. We welcome that either tonight during this meeting or after. And then if you have any reflections on kind of key assets, groups, or areas that may be already affected by climate impacts in the city, we'd also love to hear that. So Anne, I think that's getting to your point about the extreme cold, like if there are other examples that we need to be considering, please let us know.
Toss out a couple more. We do not currently have any mapping of groundwater discharge areas. And yet, just driving around town, I have seen literally, inch-high flow of surface water bubbling out of people's lawns. Because the house was built on a groundwater discharge zone. There's another house that I visited where there's a beautiful spring that is obviously a groundwater discharge zone. It heads in their yard and then goes off and is kind of a culverted system. But we have a number of areas and right downtown, in town center here, there are a number of groundwater discharge areas. They aren't flooding in the classic sense of the stream is coming up and overtopping its banks. What's happening is the entire groundwater system is rising up under it, and now the groundwater is exposed at ground surface for a significant area. And so groundwater flooding is very different from just stream flooding. And we've mapped stream flooding zones, but we have not mapped groundwater flooding zones, and we don't know what to do about that. And yet we can predict reasonably that with the increased precipitation and precipitation intensity, that the existing zones that we know exist will increase in size, and the impacts of those events will become more pronounced. So that's what I've looked at. Also, we have not done any reasonable slope stability studies within the city, and yet if you look at the city on LiDAR, you're gonna see these huge landslide blocks. If you look at Graceful Park on LiDAR, take a look at it, take a look at the neighborhood off to the east, and you will see the slump zone that rolled up. And the reason that Brookside Creek runs around the neighborhood the way it does is because it was diverted by the landslide. So sometime after the glaciers receded, and now there have been very large land movements in our area. They have not happened in the 150 years or so since European colonization, so we don't really have a detailed look at it. But if we have these increased precipitation events and precipitation intensity events, we can assume that we will have increased ground motion. And we have no study of that. I'm assuming that goes way beyond the scope of your work. But it's an area of interest.
You know, it's funny because so our house is at the bottom of the hill. And you know, this development was built on top of streams, right? They mitigated the streams. My chicken coop sits on a piece of property at the back of our property. It's changing.
Yes.
You know, it's physically,
Yeah.
I've seen it change. Yeah, I mean, land moves anyway,
Yes.
right? But there is some change that's happening to this.
But we have permitted development. We have houses that sit on what are clearly down-drop slump blocks. And the like, in many parts of the city, it's
It's
just real. So.
I just want to add, one of the groups that's, so, Mark, Planning Commission, we looked at a lot of demographics that came from the consultant that worked with us. One of the demographics is that Lake Forest Park is the aging community.
Mhm.
Right, so we have a lot of people who are aging into this community. Those people are gonna be impacted pretty severely by climate change, so just keeping in mind what's the demographics, and that information is already available.
Yeah, and SCJ is on their team.
Okay, perfect, that's right,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. Okay, just a time check, y'all, we have 8 minutes. And there's one more item on the agenda, and there's an old business agenda, so how do we want to move forward?
Yeah, I would say I welcome any additional feedback you have if you want to send that to me by email between now and our next meeting. Otherwise, there's no specific ask, just kind of an open invitation. Otherwise, we're planning to bring this back to you all in December, and we'll look forward to continuing the discussion then with hopefully providing a bit more context, adding some of those nuances you've identified, and yeah, looking forward to it.
So I saw the move, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, sorry, what was that?
We lost you for a minute.
You're back.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing just for technology here. But yeah, and I'll turn it to you, David, for our next agenda topic.
So what's on the agenda is the process review for tracking action items, which kind of goes into old business as well. To review the items from the October meeting. So what is our tracking action? What's that process?
Yeah, so right now, I'll share my screen again. We do have a list of the action items from the October meeting on the screen here. Anything folks want to add or provide updates on? I think on the consulting team side, we are working on scheduling those CPAT meetings. We're building we'll be building the fact sheet and the web page. I think the city's working on the web page with reference docs. Looking at you, Mark, on that front. And we'll be
Yes.
And we promised that we would review the climate action plan that you all have developed as a group. Not that you guys need to, but
We're good.
you're good. But that should be on the list as well, because we can make that promise. It's you and me.
Well, and there was a hope that you'd be able to guide us into the parts of the city code that you're most likely looking at for the planning commission
Which will be a process incoming
when we get there.
when we get there. Yeah. So that's good. Yeah, thank you.
So the key partners list that was in Sarah and I assume Mimi, and we were working on identifying things like PTAs and you know, which groups. So key partners is different from the outreach group in some ways. So key partners can include how we can publicize. So it is Stewardship Foundation, for instance, would be key partners in terms of a group that we would want to connect with to make certain that they were aware of what was going on. And that isn't necessarily the same as the only group you would like to talk to at an outreach meeting. You see what I mean? I got the impression that key partners and outreach groups were getting mixed conceptually. And so we were trying to come up with a key partners list, such as the PTAs. And you know, out the third place commons. As groups that we would want to partner with to make certain that they were engaged and helping with distributing information and the two-way flow. But that isn't necessarily the same as the people you know, making certain you had 4 constituencies at the 5 outreach meetings. So that's where I started getting a little confused.
So that's we did put that on the list as well, right? For coming back to that conversation.
Yeah, I think we need to keep those concepts separate if you want thoughts. For example, the small business community may be a good group for a focus group discussion.
correct.
But that's not necessarily the same as a partners list, because I can't call a meeting of the small business community the same way the Stewardship Foundation meets on a regular basis.
Right.
So there's another kind of action items or action item that I want to make sure that we're capturing. So Mark, you mentioned the example of the lens of the legislation or well, natural gas, right? So how do we capture that on this list as an example?
It's ongoing and it will come up. We don't know exactly when. And
Right.
we covered that in comp plan with a parking lot.
Right. So does this list is it a parking lot list or is this all? How do we capture all those bigger items as well besides the?
Yeah, great question, David. I'm thinking what we can do is come up with a bit more of like a rolling action item list. And so maybe we can add some sort of like heaven forbid, a little bit of a matrix that shows like when the item was originally brought forward or flagged as an action item, if there's like a due date, or if it's ongoing and something to kind of be mindful of moving forward. So we can think about that a bit offline and bring that forward.
Captures those, like in comp plan, it was equity versus equality and balance.
Yeah.
This is the same, and environmental justice, and so I see it different than task list.
But we still want to keep it present.
Yeah,
Yeah.
by February, yeah, I won't be here.
And there are a couple other items that we talked about last meeting. I just can't think of what those were either. So.
Yeah,
Okay.
and great. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing screen, David. I think the only other note I had on my end is just looking forward to our next CPAT meeting in December. And then in your slide deck, I did flag for you this timeline with kind of our proposed structure of what we're bringing forward. So I won't walk through this now, but it's there for reference.
Okay. And then we have a promise to complete that doodle poll for those additional dates.
Indeed.
And we have a few agenda items that we'll talk about. And it's 9 o'clock. Thank you, guys. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Okay. Second. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you. Bye.
Thank
all.
you. Good night.